Sit back, relax, and get ready for this one. What is shaking, YouTube? I'm your host, Lawrence, over at Mighty Comics Collectibles, and today we are back for the Hot 10 Comics of the Month breakdown. Now, what I'm doing in this video, I'm taking all the books that were on the Key Collectors Hot 10 list every week for the past 4 weeks, and we're going to cover them here together. But only 10 can make the top list. And with that said, if you're not a current subscriber of the channel, hit that sub button, smash the like button for yours truly, because it does help the channel out. A couple things before we get started. There were a total of 30 books that made the list over the past 4 weeks, which means 10 books appeared more than once. Keep that in the back of your head. Are you ready? Let's get into this month's breakdown. So let's start it off with the books that didn't make the top 10 but were on the Hot 10 list at some point over the past 30 days. Let's start it off with Marvel Superhero Secret Wars number 8 with a top sale in a CGC 9.8 for $600, up 24% over the average. Next up, an Incredible Hulk number 340 on the list twice over the past 30 days with a top sale in a CGC 9.8 for $1,175, up 22% over the average. Next up, Daredevil number 4 with a high sale in a CGC 9.0 for $1,500, up 15% over the average. Then we had Hero for Hire number 1 with a high sale in a CGC 8.5 for $689, up 14% over that average. Another new book this week was Uncanny X-Men number 100 in a high sale of a CGC 9.6 for $773, up 4% over the average. Next up, a Fantastic Four number 13 with a high sale in a 9.0 for $6,026, but only up 2% over the average. After that, Silver Surfer number 1 with a top sale in a CGC 9.2, selling for an incredible $5,400, up 8% over the average. Then one of my favorite books of all time, Fantastic Four 48, with a top sale in a CGC 8.0 for $3,342, up again 2% over that average. Then Amazing Spider-Man number 300 with a top sale in a CGC 9.8 for $2,810, up again 2% over the average. Next up, Fantastic Four number 112, a classic cover with a top sale in a CGC 9.0 for only $750, up 8% over the average. Moon Knight number 1 with a top sale in a CGC 9.8 for only $305, but up 22% over the average. Then this week, we had Strange Tales number 169 with a top sale and an 8.0, selling for $279, but only up 1% over the average. Next up, Ghost Rider number 1 with a high sale and a 9.6, selling for $2,799, up 8% over the average. Then we have Batman number 251 with a top sale and a CGC 9.2 for $1,851, up 6% over the average. Next up, Avengers number 57, the first appearance of the Vision, with a top sale and a CGC 9.0 for $1,200, up 18% over the average. Next up, the Trifecta, Amazing Spider-Man number 50, with a high sale and a CGC 7.5 for $2,145, up 23% over the average. And we're going to end the honorable mentions list with 2 massive keys. First up, Avengers number 1, with a top sale and a CGC 5.5, selling for $5,800, up 11% over the average. And lastly, Daredevil number 1 with a high sale and a CGC 5.5, selling for $4,579, up a crazy 21% over the average. Now let's get into this week's breakdown. Starting us off at number 10 this week is X-Men number 94, the second team appearance of the new X-Men team, but the first new appearance in the main X-Men title. And a couple of weeks back with a CGC 9.0, selling for $1,301, up 3% over the average. Then we had a CGC 6.0 sale for only $500, but up 10% over the average. You guys know how I feel about this book. I love it, but I'd rather own Giant Size X-Men number 1. To me, that is the money buck when we're talking about the X-Men, if you can't get X-Men number 1 from the 1960s. With that said, I still think it's a must-own book, but I have to have it for a deal. Coming in at number 9 this month is Werewolf by Night number 32, and the first appearance and origin of Moon Knight, one of my favorite Bronze Age covers to boot. It was on the list twice this month. First, with a CGC 8.5, selling for $1,800, up 19% over the average. Then we had a CGC 7.5 sale for $1,031, up 4% over the average. Next up, we had a CGC 6.0 sale for only $800, but up 22% over the average. Has this book fallen enough for you guys to be a buyer? For me, I think it's about time that I want to pick this book up. But again, I want to stick to the higher grades on this one. The purples have to be deep. It has to be a beautiful presenting copy. But either way, I think I'm a buyer of this one. Coming in at the 8th spot this month is Fantastic Four Annual number 6 and the first appearance of Annihilus, the ruler of the negative zone. This is also the first appearance of Franklin Richards. This is also on the list twice over the past 30 days. And last week we had a CGC 7.0 selling for $331, up 18% over the average. Then we had a CGC 8.5 sale for $650, up 12% over the average. Then we had a lowly CGC 4.0 selling for only $140, but up a crazy 32% over the average. I've said about this book in the past, you know why it's on this list. With Franklin Richards supposedly coming to the MCU, it is still cheap enough to me where you can find it and you want to own it. I'm giving it my blessing. But it's now the right time to be buying this book with all the spec out there. I'm going to say you're probably going to get a better deal later down the line after FF movie comes out. So it's up to you. But for me, I might be staying away. But if you can get a good deal on it, I'd be a buyer. Coming in at number 7 on the Hot 10 Comics of the Month is Invincible number 1, the first appearance of Invincible. It made the Hot 10 list twice this past month. First, with a CGC 9.8, selling for $4,500, up an incredible 30% over the average. Then we had two 9.6 sales. First up, one for $1,595, up 13% over the average. Then we had a massive sale in a 9.6, selling for an incredible $2,650, a new all-time high over the previous record in 2021. To me, if you're an Invincible fan, this is a must-own book. But I'm not paying up for this one, okay? After the shows are done, maybe after this season is over, I'd be going ahead and looking for this book after all the hype dies down. But right now, Invincible is on fire, and I'm not going to touch it where it is. At the 6th spot this month is Giant Size X-Men number 1, the first team appearance of the new X-Men team. This is also the second appearance of Wolverine. And last week we had a CGC 8.0 selling for $3,603, up a whopping 20% over the average. Then we had a CGC 6.0 sale for only $1,900, up 6% over the average. So I told you guys earlier in this video, this is the book I'm after if I'm looking for X-Men books. If I can't go out and get an X-Men number 1 from the Silver Age, this is the next best thing. But we're not picking any copy. I want a copy with incredible colors and nice white cover to boot. But yes, I'm always 100% a buyer of this book. It has come down enough for me to go ahead and buy it, but I'm only buying the one with the best appearance I can find. Falling to number 5 this month is Daredevil number 131 and the first appearance and origin of Bullseye. It made the list twice over the past 30 days. Last week we had a CGC 9.2 selling for $595, up an incredible 36% over the average. Then we had a CGC 9.4 sale for $540, less than a 9.2, up 5% over the average. Then we had a CGC 9.0 selling for $412, up 15% over the average. To me, these prices seem a little high. I think last year you could have gotten a much better deal on this book, but with Bullseye returning to the MCU and Daredevil Born Again, I'm probably sticking away from this right now unless you can get a really great deal on a good-looking copy. At the 4th spot this month is Fantastic Four number 52 and the first appearance of the Black Panther T'Challa, King of Wakanda. And just this past week, we had a CGC 7.0 selling for $1,200, up 7% over the average. Then we had a CGC 5.0 sale for $605, up 10% over the average. Before I give you any information, do yourself a favor, go to eBay and see how many copies of this book are for sale. It is crazy how many are out there. With that said, when you get a good deal on this book, I do want to own it. But again, these prices are a little bit over the top for me. I think you can get a much better deal if you just do your due diligence, but I still love to own it. Back to the Bronze Age at number 3, it is Incredible Hulk number 181 and the first full appearance of Wolverine. It made the Hot 10 list twice over the past 30 days, and last week we had a CGC 8.0 3.5, selling for $5,800, up 10% over the average. Then we had a CGC 4.0 sale, selling for $2,200, up 1% over the average. Then we had a CGC 9.2 sale for $8,000, up 2% over the average. And lastly, a CGC 6.5 selling for $3,153, up 2% over the average. I'll say it. A lot of copies out there of this book. If you watch one of our earlier videos about the CGC census, there are almost 17,000 copies of this one out there that are graded already. So I'm going to say to you this. If you want to own the book, go ahead, buy it, get the best deal that you possibly can. But if you're not a huge Wolverine fan, I see no reason in spending this kind of money on this book. Coming in at number 2 this month is Daredevil number 1, the first appearance of Matt Murdock as Daredevil. Daredevil number 1 has been on the list twice over the past 4 weeks. We're going to start with a CGC 5.5 selling for $4,579, up a crazy 21% over the average. Then we had a CGC 6.5 sale for $5,700, but up 7% over the average. Lastly, a CGC 3.0 selling for $2,295 and up 10% over the average. Again, love this book. A great Silver Age first appearance, a must own in my opinion. But with the show coming out, and it's phenomenal right now, a lot of people are flocking to this book. So is now the right time to buy? I'm going to say no. Hold off on this one. Wait for the show to die down. And then if you want to bounce in your copy, go right ahead. And finally, at the top spot, numero uno, number 1, the most selling book over the past 4 weeks. It is Amazing Spider-Man number 129 and the first appearance of the Punisher, Frank Castle. This book was on the list all 4 weeks for the past 30 days. We're going to start with a CGC 9.2 selling for $3,059, up 5% over the average. Next up, a CGC 9.4 selling for $3,961, up 8% over the average. Then a CGC 9.6 selling for $6,566, up 6% over the average. And lastly, a CGC 9.2 selling for $3,000, up 3% over the average. Man, I cannot believe this book was on the list all 4 weeks. It shows you this book is truly hot. You know why? Frank Castle and Daredevil Born Again. Awesome scene that he just had with Daredevil. So to me, do I want to own this book? You guys know I do. I'm an Amazing Spider-Man fan. I'm a Punisher fan. Classic cover fan. It is a must own. But is now the right time to buy it? I don't know. If you can get a good copy for the right price, I'll be all over it. It is a must have in my opinion. But use discretion. Don't overpay for this book. Whew. I'm not going to lie to you guys. That was a lot of information and a lot of work to put these books together. So I'm going to think to myself, I'm going to go back and do this list every week from now on. Doing it once a month is just way too much work. So for all the people out there who love watching this list weekly, guess what? It's coming back. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. It is now time for my best buy of the week, and this is a hard choice. I'm not going to lie. With all the Daredevil Born Again stuff that's going on, I'm staying away from those books for right now, so I'm going with Werewolf by Night number 32, the first appearance of Moon Knight. I still think it's getting real cheap right now, and it's a book I definitely want to own. Hope you guys enjoy the video. This is Lawrence over at Mighty Comics Collectibles saying thank you for watching, happy collecting, and I'll talk to you guys soon.